Alright buddies, it's that time. It's time to make some art. This is remote learning video number 1 with Mr. Locke. I want to start out by apologizing for the very low production quality. I'm working with what I got, and it's even worse than you think. This is actually being filmed inside of a cardboard box with a hole cut out on a cutting board. So I hope you enjoy this very low quality video. So here's what you're going to need. First off, you need some paper. I have a sketchbook here. If you don't have one, pretty handy. You can keep all your drawings in it. And who knows how long we're going to be out. So keep everything organized, and you won't have to be looking for paper. Plus, it's usually pretty good to draw on. It's good quality paper. It's a little bit better than like printer paper. And you need a pencil today. So go ahead and grab that. Now this is kind of going to be a step-by-step video, and actually I'm going to ask you guys, as we get to each new step, I want you to pause the video. I want you to watch what I do, look at your source, try to get it as close as possible, and then once you feel like you got it, go ahead and hit play, and you'll learn the next step. And by the end of this, we're going to have some pretty realistic looking eyeballs. These eye drawings that we're doing, I'd like you to do them from an image or a mirror. I don't want you doing these out of your head, even if you're already good at drawing eyes. I'd like you to look in a mirror or go ahead and take a photo. Sometimes it'll help with that photo, especially because we're just using pencil today. It'll help if you turn it into a black and white photo, but don't kind of mess around with the contrast or the brightness too much. Just whatever it looks like in that photo. We're going to try to get all those nice grays in there too. Okay, so let's start. Alright, so first off, let's look at the parts of the eye we're drawing. I'm going to use some of the space over here. So first off, we have the pupil and the iris. That's the middle of your eye. This is the pupil, this is the iris, that's the colored part. And then we have the eyelids. Alright, and we have these lashes up here. And we have the lashes at the bottom. And then we have that weird, like, little meaty part right there. It's kind of gross. I think that's the tear duct. I'm not entirely sure, but you can draw that, especially if your drawings get really good and detailed. You're going to want that in there. And this is something people usually forget. There's another line, at least on most folks. It's a fold that's created at the top of the top lid, so right above the top lid. And that's going to be really important that you get that right, because that'll help it to look like your eye. And that's what we're going for. So I'm going to draw right here. I'm going to try to draw a little bit bigger so you guys can hopefully see this okay. And I'm not going to show you the source image I'm using. I just want you guys to look at, as closely as you can, what these lines are doing and the spacing. So we're going to start with 3 lines. Step 1. 3 lines. So these 3 lines, I'll put it under here, are the top and bottom eyelid, basically the opening of the eye, and that 3rd line, the one that's just above the top lid. We're going to start with these because if you get these wrong, you might as well start over. These are super important. If these don't look like your eye, none of this will look like your eye. This is what gives you most of the character, so it looks like your specific eye. So here's what I'm going to look at. Now, looking at some of the differences between top and bottom lids, I'm going to start here. It kind of comes up before it curves, and it comes down like that. Now, normally I'd be using lighter line, but I'm trying to draw this dark enough so you guys can see it okay. So it's a really specific curve. It comes up, and then it kind of curves down, and then it really comes down on this side. I'm going to make it a little bit more angled right here too. That's that first one. That's this guy right here. And the second one, this bottom one, this lays almost totally flat across your paper. A lot of people will exaggerate that and do the same thing they did with the top. it doesn't do that for most people. At the very least, it's going to start out pretty horizontal, and then maybe it comes down a little bit here, and it usually wraps up in this region. Okay, so those are my first two lines. My third line, that's that one there. I'm going to try to make that one as accurately spaced as I can, and then it gets really close here. And it gets kind of further away here. Sometimes you'll see on some folks, I'll even do it here, it kind of splits a little bit. So just draw what you see. Don't make it up. We're just doing lines here. Okay. So one important thing, if you draw this and you're looking at it and you're thinking, that doesn't look right, check it for the width to the height ratio. That's really important. And if you do it way too big, even if you do a nice job with the shape, if you make it way too open, you're going to look really surprised. Or if you do it way, way, way too skinny, you're going to look really sleepy. So double check that that looks good compared to that. And we're going to know in a second when we do our second step, which is 2 circles. Now these circles are not going to fit in there properly, and it's not going to look like your source image if we don't first make sure that this is correct. The one I'm looking at starts right about up here-ish. Oh, I didn't tell you guys to stop. So go ahead and draw those 3 lines and pause your video. And then we're going to do the next step. Stop watching this video. Hit pause. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you did okay. And those 3 lines look pretty darn close to what you're looking at on your image. The 2 circles we were talking about, the most important thing here is that these things are perfectly centered within each other. Okay, so that looks pretty good. If it were like this, that is never going to look good. That's going to look really cartoony, okay? So these have to be centered, and also when the eye is drawn on top of it, it might cut off some part of that. It still needs to be circular. So that's what that would look like. They're still centered within each other. Basically from this center point here, same distance from here to here, and from here to here, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and put this in here. This barely hits the bottom, leaves just a sliver of white. And quite a bit of the top of it is cut off. Now I'm probably making this easier than it actually is. It's kind of tough to get a really nice, consistent curve. So definitely start super light. That looks pretty good. And then the center of this circle, I'm thinking would be probably right here. It's not the center of this space from here to here. It's the center of this circle. I can go ahead and do my pupil in there. Once you have that, double check that the amount of white space right here and right here looks pretty good. Sometimes it's way bigger on one side than it is the other, just depending on your eye shape. And then go ahead and pause that video, and we'll do the next step. All right, welcome back. Step 3, lashes. Now this is the single most challenging thing. I've actually left this side of the paper totally blank so I can show you in depth what it is that I want you to do. Do not just start trying to draw lashes on here. Lashes are different from probably anything you've drawn before. You have to do it in a very specific and controlled way. They start at the root of the hair, and they're hairs, so they start thick and they get really thin as they come up. So the motion is kind of like this. It kind of comes down and out and up. And we're going to start with the lashes that are right here. Now before we do that, and I want you to do this too, when you pause the video, I want you to start with this step here for the lashes. Give yourself a random curved line. That's going to be our top eyelid line. And then I want you to look at your source image and really bear down, push down hard. And then as you come out, go a little looser, a little softer there. Hopefully you can see that. It's creating a really nice hair-like texture. You can fill that in because they're not obviously perfectly spaced. All right, so you'll notice on the outside, and this is the outside of the eye, this is that inside part that would have that really gross tear duct thing. On the outside of the eye, they kind of lay down this way. And then as it gets closer to the top of the eye, at some point here, it goes straight up. And then it comes in and it kind of goes out this way. So let's look at that on our drawing. It's a little bit bigger than what I was doing there, so these lashes I'm going to make even darker and thicker. I might even go over them twice to start. This is actually a tough angle for me to make these lashes at, so I will remind you guys, you can turn your paper, you can draw whatever is comfortable, and this specific movement going out like that, that might be more comfortable with your paper angled a little bit. So try a couple different things, see what works best for you. And I'm going to kind of hurry up here, get the rest of these in here. This is where I see it goes straight up. And some of these, they go down into the white of the eye, out, like that. Now if you do too many lashes, it'll look like fur, okay? It won't look like nice soft hair. So I'm going to kind of simplify some of the ends of those, clean that up a little bit. Towards the inside here, they get really light, and they sometimes just kind of disappear. So unless you have really long lashes on the inside, don't put a ton there, and don't make them thick and dark and long. Once you get good at it, you can kind of do what I'm doing here and just really bear down and do these quickly. It's got a nice natural look to it if you do it with a little bit of speed, but don't do that yet. Make sure you practice it and you feel pretty confident with it. So I can spend more time with that, I can get those looking really good, but we're going to move on. If you guys can get it to be at least that good, that should be pretty close. Okay, go ahead and do those lashes. We'll do the top lashes first. The bottom lashes are a little different, so go ahead and pause and practice those top lashes here. Do this a few times. Let's do at least like 4 different fake top eyelids that we can plop these on. Okay, so just like I'm doing on my paper here, do these a ton. I mean, you could fill this entire space. Do it until you get it right. Okay, let's pause there. All right, so now we're doing the bottom lashes. So we'll go top and bottom. That's step A and B. 3A, this is 3B. Now, I'm going to lighten this a little bit. Hopefully you can still see it. And what's different about the bottom lashes is they don't actually start at this line. If you look really close at your source image or your mirror, there's going to be a little gap, a little area usually of like kind of pinkish, weird, fleshy stuff. And it starts not here, but a little bit further away. So I just gave myself kind of a guideline. This line is not there in real life, but that's going to allow me to keep a consistent path. Now you notice already, bottom lashes are usually shorter and lighter than the top ones. And they sometimes end even sooner. Kind of going straight down here. If you have them close enough together, you probably won't have to erase this line that we put in here, because it'll just look like the start of that row of lashes. Okay, that's pretty good. You can practice that one too. If you did these pretty well and you feel confident with that, these are going to go way, way faster and way easier just because they're lighter, and you've already had the practice on these other ones. Okay, so go ahead and stop the video and try that bottom set of lashes and come on back. All right, last step. We're just going to call it shading. Now hopefully, those of you that are kind of sick of doing line drawings, you are really good at doing those, the still life, paper airplane. I mean, you guys got a ton of practice with shading, so this shouldn't be too hard for you, but make sure you're drawing what you see and not what you know. A lot of the time people will put veins in the eye, or they'll put like, you know, they'll leave these areas just completely white, and we're going to find out in a second that's not what it looks like. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is we're going to go through and look at the pupil, and if there's any areas where you see those white reflections, that's what makes it look like glossy, because the eye it's got moisture in it. And so if you, and it's also round, so if you put these little spots in that we're going to create highlights for, we're going to make sure that we don't shade over the spots that should be preserved a little bit lighter. And I'll put sort of this kind of thing here because it does lighten a bit here. All right, once we have that, nice easy step here, we can go ahead and, unless you see a lot of reflection in here, you can go ahead and make this pretty jet black, and it's going to look pretty good. All right, now something else I want you to notice that's also very dark. After we get that in there, I'm going to darken some of these lashes real quick. After we get that in there, look at the outside of your iris. Now, even if you have really light eyes, the outside of your iris is always the darkest part of your iris. That's the colored part. So I'm going to darken this a bit. My nice light lines that I had in there, which you should always draw light, makes it easy for me to go over anything that I know is right. So I like the curve of that circle. Now I feel good about going over it. I'm going to start really dark out here, and then I want you just to, almost like from a, there's like a center point here, I want you to just draw some lines. We're going to create a base value. Don't fill in your highlight sections. And we're going to do that with these lines that kind of go towards the center of that iris. Because if you look really close, the eye is made up of almost these little like fiber looking things, that iris part. And that'll be a little less detail that we're going to have to do. So you can leave it like that, but that's not perfect. This darkness in the outsides tends to come in, and also as it comes in, there's some parts that create more of those little fiber, like a more pronounced area, and some areas that do that a little less. The iris tends to lighten as it gets closer to the pupil. You'll see what I'm doing with that section in a sec. And then right here, at least on mine, because those are pretty long lashes, it's blocking a lot of light. So this is going to be really dark in here. And that's going to add a lot of three-dimensionality and depth. It's going to make it look like these are coming towards us. And it just adds a nice level of realism. So this part here, it is not actually a highlight, but on mine, it is a lighter set of values. I think it's actually the reflection of the paper, and you might see that too. If your paper's right here, your eye will actually kind of reflect that. Cool. So that's looking pretty good. We're not quite done. There's one last thing that I'd like you to do, and that's looking at the white of the eye. Okay? The white of the eye very rarely is ever just white. You tend to get some more intense values in this kind of weird meaty part. And you can see I'm putting down a fairly dark, medium dark kind of gray. And this usually will lighten as it comes closer to the iris. Now if you really look close, you might see that the iris, as it goes into the white, it kind of softens a bit. Maybe it doesn't have as harsh of an outside line. I know this is a long step, I'm sorry about that. You can pause this in different segments too if you want. If you just want to do the iris first, or the pupil first, and then come back to watch what else we've covered here. This is also going to help that bottom eyelid to look a lot more real. You can see if there's any of this that actually does get fairly dark, because it's kind of just hiding, this white is just hiding behind that pink waterline. So it sometimes gets a nice thin shadow. All right, so this is basically all you have to do in order to make a realistic eye. This is the stuff I really want you to practice. I do think if you have some extra time, let's say you were able to do that in like a half hour and you want to keep working, you could go ahead and try to perfect like how dark and how thick and how much character this line has here, because now that we have lashes in front of it, we lose some of that. And you can kind of put that back in and make that look a lot nicer. If you really want to go nuts with this, you could go ahead and kind of map out where that eyebrow is. And then basically the same steps that we did for the eyelashes. You look at the direction that the hair would be going in. Usually at the inside of the eyebrow it starts upward. And then by the time it's over here, it's laying down. So you can block that in. This has a subtle change in direction as it goes that way. And as you fill that in and get that to look a lot nicer, that'll look pretty complete. And then you can go ahead and shade some of the space in between and around. And if you finish this, if you do a nice little block here, that's a finished drawing. That's a done, like completed, turn-inable finished drawing. Okay? So good luck, guys. Definitely put time into this. These things are really fun to do. And good luck.